Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, as the famous man said, finally we're getting a look at the KTM 390 Adventure. I'd seen the bike before, of course, but I had not test ridden it. Now is the time to test ride the bike, and with so much promise. Yesterday I test rode the Tiger, and although it's a fantastic bike in many ways, there was slight disappointment that it was not the complete package because it had a lot of vibes on the handlebars. So I'm just hoping that this bike doesn't disappoint, because it's been so hyped. And look at this, it's kind of got the right proportions. Essentially, people say it's like the Duke 390, except that it's got the adventure form factor, which means that it's easy to ride in India. It's got ground clearance, it's got comfortable ergonomics, it's got a 19-inch wheel, and so it should really be the all-in-one bike for India. Relatively inexpensive and provides all kinds of features that are only found in very advanced bikes. Things like traction control, cornering ABS, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it sounds incredible, but I think they have cornering ABS on this bike. I'll check that and put that in the graphics on this video. So let's get going and then we'll talk. Brakes are very good. That's a really good thing about this. The brakes seem really good, but it's not exactly set up very soft. So going over speed breakers feels a little stiff, and it kind of confirms what my suspicions were, that this is not really an adventure bike, but really a bike that's meant to be a everyday kind of bike that you can enjoy, but in Indian conditions, which means potholes, bad roads, all that stuff. The ergonomics are really comfortable, actually. But when you're stepping down from something like an Africa Twin, I mean, you have to kind of refit your expectations when you're on a bike like this. It's not going to be sophisticated. There's a lot of vibrations coming in, and if anything, this is making the Tiger vibrations on the Tiger handlebar seem very sophisticated in comparison, because it's really vibrating a lot, and so are the mirrors at idle. But it gets better, a little bit better, as you accelerate. It's quite stiffly sprung, and like I suspected, it's more of a street bike that's great at zipping in and out of corners. And at least I haven't tried the corners yet, but that's what all the reviews have said. So looking up all the material on this bike, it felt like this bike was designed to be a do-it-all kind of bike in India, and that meant also that it couldn't be too heavily leaning into the adventure bike kind of space. It needed to be accessible to everybody. It needed to be an everyday bike, easy to ride in the city, and yet you can take it a little bit off-road. So the ground clearance figures are pretty decent. The ergonomics on this bike are really comfortable. So if this is just a Duke 390 with comfortable ergonomics, that's a win for me, because I really like that bike. But you can only enjoy that bike when you're revving it fairly high and not in these city streets. This seems to be the same case with this bike. So this bike really comes into its own after 6,000 RPM. And there's where you can enjoy it thoroughly, which means that it's a great intercity bike commute, because on the highways you'll enjoy it a lot. Actually, if you hit bumps at speed, it does soak them up. Zippy. Supposed to have a quick shifter. Let's try that. Wow, works really well. I discovered the quick shifter on the Tiger, and my initial impressions were that it was just some fancy stuff that people were marketing and didn't really make a difference, but honestly, it adds so much to the convenience and comfort. So I would recommend it very strongly if you haven't tried. All right, going over the bumps, the suspension's quite stiff. Let's see how it feels like standing up. Not great. Far too forward leaned over. It's not exactly a bike that I'd stand up and ride. Maybe just to go over a couple of bumps like that. No. Not really meant to stand and ride. Really feels happy only after 6,000 RPM. Then it feels really good. Before that, it's kind of an ordinary experience. Oh, I should have been in the other lane. Brakes are plenty good. Bike's nimble. It has that single cylinder clatter, and you can feel the vibrations in the handlebars for sure. Feels a lot like the Duke. Obviously it would, it has the same engine. Yeah, it's great when you rev it up to 6,000, and then if you're in third gear, fourth gear at 8,000 revs, it feels really happy there. So it's a great bike for that. But unfortunately, I don't think it'll be like a bike that you'll enjoy riding in a relaxed way. And I think part of the charm of adventure bikes is that they need to have that flexibility to be both enjoyable while riding the highway, but also cruising village roads. But on open roads, it's actually quite a lot of fun. And considering the budget differences between this and expensive adventure bikes like the Tiger, I mean, I think we'd be asking for too much if we were even comparing them. So clearly we have to move away from the mindset and compare this bike to something in its own category and class or budget range. But my only complaint or grouse would be that if it's Christian, an adventure bike, it should be able to soak up the bumps a lot better. This suspension is very stiffly sprung. Seems like it's meant to be a bit of a sports bike, really. Yeah, absolutely. 6,000 plus RPM feels great. I mean, I wouldn't mind taking this bike all the way to Nasik or something once normalcy resumes, and it would be great to tour actually, because it seems like a pretty good highway bike. It's not a lot of fun in the bumpy small streets. Not happy at 3,000 RPM. Happiest at between 6 and 8,000 RPM. Uh-oh, should not have taken the flyover. Look at the traffic on the other side. Well, let's look to get back somehow from the other side. So I think overall the impressions are that this is an interesting proposition, but if you have already ridden the expensive adventure bikes, the 800cc plus adventure bikes, you'll have to reset your expectations of what you get from this bike. It's a fun, interesting bike. Go anywhere, very light, nimble, kind of everyday, but it's a high revving bike and it's kind of stiffly sprung. So those two things, in my opinion, make it a little bit of a problem, really. So it's really nimble and it's buzzing. If you don't have a big budget, it can provide you a lot of fun. But it's going to be uncomfortable riding. Cops everywhere. I don't know what they're checking for, really. So a little bit underwhelming, actually, to be frank. I mean, the funny thing is the Tiger was actually feeling more nimble yesterday because of the, I guess, the position or the ergonomics. I like this quick shifter function a lot. Never thought I would. Thought it is a bit of a marketing gimmick, but honestly, it's really useful. I mean, they try to do everything on this bike, and I think for the kind of price package this bike is available at, it's pretty good. But it's just about if you've reached a relatively advanced stage of riding, I'm not really sure this would really do much for you because it's too stiffly sprung, and I'm not really sure this will be really good to take on off-road trails. One of the advantages is that this bike is very light, but you want suspension that can handle it. I mean, I would rather take the rally kit from Hero X Pulse and take that off-roading than this bike, because that bike's also light and you don't need a lot of power while you're off-roading. You need a really light bike and great suspension that can handle rocks and, you know, really difficult terrain. And this seems like it's just too stiff. To do that really comfortably. I'm sure it can do something, and a skilled rider can work miracles on many different kinds of bikes. But for a regular Joe like me, trying off-roading, no, I don't think I'm going to do that on this bike. This bike is great as a general city plus highway bike. Provides fantastic value. Really good at high revs. Enjoys being up there. Turns pretty quickly, very nimble. The tires feel pretty planted. I mean, there's a bunch of road modes and things like that, but I'm just going to ignore that for now because this is just a quick impression. Oh, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you get an adventure bike in India, what you want is these kinds of roads should be able to handle with a plumb. And while it's not having a problem dealing with them, it's kind of not really the most comfortable experience for the rider. And it's not easy to stand either. The clutch is very light, I must say. It's very easy to filter through traffic. And deceptively tall bike actually. Luckily it's light, so we are almost back at the showroom, and while it's been nice, I don't think this is a bike for somebody who's already ridden an Africa Twin or is considering a Tiger. I thought maybe there'd be a different kind of excitement, and it definitely is there in a small band, and I guess you could enjoy it, but it's not in the same league, and you know, one shouldn't expect it to be. Wow, butterfly in the middle of all this traffic. So it's practical in the sense that all these speed breakers and stuff, you don't need to worry about them damaging your bike, but you still have to slow down when you go over them because the suspension's too stiff, otherwise it'll bounce up. Let's try this standing up. Quite stiff. I wouldn't do that. Easy to handle though, very light. I wish this were a twin actually. That would make a lot of sense. But overall, this bike turned out to be a little bit of a disappointment, unfortunately, because we were looking forward to a bike that does it all. And like the Duke 390 was a very great alternative to a sports bike in India that did pretty much everything. And I really enjoyed riding it, except that it was a little small for me. I was hoping that the 390 Adventure would be the one bike that I would keep while I kept changing all my bigger bikes, all the Tigers and the Africa Twins and the GSs, but I would always have a small bike that was the KTM 390 Adventure in my garage. But unfortunately, that's not going to be the case.